G'day everyone. Wanted to talk to you about this amazing lens that I've been using over the last couple of weeks. It's the Tamron 28-200mm, and I thought that I'd give it a really good workout. So before I've done this review, I've actually taken it and done multiple shoots around the place. Now I've even included or done videos as well. So what I've done in this review, I've tried to cover everything that I could think of, and what I've done is I've done video, I've used the A9, I've used the a7iii, and also the a6400. So I've tried to use it in every way that I thought someone would use this lens. And I tried to do a full review like using it as a travel type lens, where I took it down the coast and sort of did some landscape shoots, also a model shoot as well. And I did a video review as well. When I say video review, I did a dancer in a forest to check out how this lens went with video as well. I've even included shooting a bit of wildlife, just some beautiful sort of ocean scenes and things like that I did as well. So I've tried to cover it in every way possible, and I will sum up at the end what I think about this lens overall. So to start with, I thought that we'd look at the build quality of this lens. So the build quality itself is really good. I mean, this is typical of how Tamron lenses are made. They're like a polycarbonate type finish, but I found them to be incredibly robust, and they don't mark or scratch or anything. And I've found, in fact, that the Tamron lenses seem to be about the best lenses out there for, say, not showing wear and tear after a period of time. My Tamron 28-75 is still as good as the day that I bought it, which is amazing if you compare it to my Sony lenses that I've got. The barrel does extend out of this, but I've found that that's fine. I mean, the beautiful part about this is it has a 67mm filter, so that makes it really nice and small and really quite light. And there's a nice bit of resistance when you're using the barrel extension, and even the focus wheel is nice to move as well. There is a lock on the screen on the lens as well that you can press on so that the barrel won't come out, which is nice because you can get some lens creep coming out if you don't have that lock on there. That's really all there is to this. There's decent weather sealing right throughout, so it has got weather sealing all through the lens, including even through your areas right through the lens as well. The lens is variable in aperture, and we'll have a look at the variable apertures now that you get from this lens. Okay, so let's look at this. So 28mm, you get an f2.8. Going to 35mm, you get 3.2. 50mm, 3.5. 70mm, f4. 100mm, f4.5. 135mm, f5. And then it's 200mm, and it's 5.6. It is a 67mm filter thread, which is great because it shares the same filter size as the 28-75 and the 17-28 as well, which is really good. It's 117mm in length, and it's 575 grams in weight. Now, the lens itself has 18 elements in 14 groups. The lens itself also has broadband anti-reflection coatings as well. That will reduce ghosting and flare. Now, the other great feature of this lens too is the macro ability of this lens. You can actually use this. It's a 1:3 macro, which is not as good as, say, the 28-75, but it's still very, very usable. And in fact, you can get as close as 7.5 inches. Now, this has RXD stepping motor autofocus as well, and it really is very, very fast and completely silent. So that's fantastic if you're doing this with video and you have on-camera audio. So let's start now talking about autofocus. Okay, so what I wanted to do here, I wanted to check out eye autofocus. So I'm using the A9 here, and I wanted to see how quickly this follows me around. Now you can see I'm using my glasses, and it's super good even hitting glasses here. It's following me around. It'll move to face detect when it can't get my eyes. I'm running backwards and forwards. I'm just laughing at myself doing this. But it's really quick. I mean, super quick in how it locks on. Like, in fact, it's as fast as almost anything that I've used in that regard when I'm dealing with photos. So it was terrific in how this worked. Now, this is one where I wanted to grab Renee and I wanted to check how the tracking works. So this has got the tracking working now on Renee. So I wanted to see how that functioned, and it's actually really good. So again, I was just asking Renee to move backwards and forwards, run around and see how that went. And it's following her very, very quickly indeed. Again, if she moves up close, it'll grab eye detect and then move out the way and it grabs her again. So it was super, super good in this tracking exercise. Okay, so let's see how this goes with video autofocus. So again, I've asked Renee here to just move around, move up and down to see how it keeps her in focus as she's moving around. And it seems to be really, really good. I was actually surprised how well the video autofocus stacked up. I was quite happy with it. In fact, I used it for that whole dance video and it worked very, very well. So here I wanted to see how the video performed on the a6400 with Renee just walking towards the camera and seeing how face detect and everything went. This wasn't through the Ninja V, but I can see that it does struggle a little bit more than say with the A9 or the a7 III, but holds it generally in very good focus. You'll see a little bit when she gets a bit closer later on, then it starts to struggle. See there, it's moved a little bit. It takes a bit longer when she moves back in to lock on focus compared to the full frame cameras. And you'll see here when she comes back into the frame here that it's not got her there, but then when she stands there, it locks on, and you can see there it's locked on. So it's definitely slower than what, say, the A9 or the a7 III would be, but it is working. It's just, you know, a little bit slower, but that's probably what I expected. Now, these next shots with the A9, you can see here how quickly this gains focus when I press the autofocus button. And it's super quick. Like I zoomed in there, press the autofocus button, and bang, she's immediately sharp. So the focus is incredibly quick on this lens. So what I think we'll do now is we'll look through Lightroom and I can take you through a whole set of images, and it will show things like sharpness, chromatic aberration, and things like that, the macro performance and everything else about this lens. So let's do that now. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the A9, the a7 III actually. And so this is just Renee walking up towards the camera. We were on f5 at this stage because I had to go to about 122mm, and I just asked her basically to walk towards the camera. So it was using face detect, and so you're seeing her walking up towards the camera here. I mean, this really isn't a hard test, but it's just showing that, you know, it is holding focus all the way through, and it worked very, very well. If we look now, say, at the A9, I'll just bring this up. This was a bit more of a focus test because I asked Renee to run towards me. Now, you saw this actual test when I showed this before from the Ninja, but these are the image stills that you can look at now. So we'll have a look at this where she's running towards the camera, and she ran fairly fast. I'll have to wait for this to load each time. And it did hold the focus very, very well. It's holding it all the way through. You know, and all of these are really quite acceptable for what she was doing. So it certainly was holding on in all of these cases. I mean, if I blow up the image, you can see here that it's fairly good. Remember, this has had no sharpening or anything done at all, and it's done a great job. So that was with her running up quite fast towards the camera. So she didn't hold back, so the camera worked very, very well in that regard. Now let's look at the macro performance of this lens. It really is good because you've got the 1 to 3 macro that you can use here, and I think it's quite beautiful. I mean, you can get quite close, so you know it works very, very well. And these are a couple of images here that you look at that we can see how the macro performance works. The rendering looks really nice if you look in the background. You know, it looks lovely through the background through there. These were shot at 2.8. Again, you can see it is nice. The colors are beautiful. Again, this one too, I just wanted to see how close you can get. So the macro performance is really, really nice. And to have that in a travel lens with, you know, like a zoom range of 28 to 200 is really remarkable. So next, let's look at portraits, how this worked with portraits. So again, I've done a series of images here. This was an edited one. Most of the others are unedited. This was one where I wanted to have Renee looking up into the forest, up at the beams of light that were coming in. It's quite beautiful. This was shot at 67mm. This one here, I wanted to sort of shoot a couple of different ones where I show the zoom range. So this is at 77mm, and then it jumps up to 200 200 mil. So you can see the difference there, and it's great to be able to do that. Now, it's very, very sharp in both cases. I mean, if I enlarge this up, you'll see here that once it renders, it's nice and sharp. Remember, these are straight out of camera. There's no editing done at all on these. If I go up to the next one at 200 mil, and again, if we look at Renee there, it's very, very sharp. So now I did have to raise the ISO in these though, because I didn't take a flash. Well, I took the flash, but I forgot the actual remote. So I had to use the ProPhoto B10 on continuous lighting. So I did have to up the ISO in this case. This is another one that shows the great zoom range between this as well. So this is shot at 68 mil, and then I went up to 200 mil again there. So another one with the waterfall in the background. This one has been edited, unlike the other ones that weren't edited. It gives beautiful rendering. I really love how sharp the lens is, and the lens really has a nice rendering in the background. This is shot at f4.5. This is another one shot at f4.5. These are others where we were down at the beach, and I wanted to sort of look at, how the lens looked over a range here. Again, you can see that I've shot this one here is at 63 millimeter. This one here is at 103 millimeter. So it's great to be able to shoot right up. Now, the next one I've run to 200. So, it works great through the whole focal range. It really does. This was an edited one I did, in fact, from this image here. And I've done some editing work on it. This one here is a lovely one of Renee sitting down. And this one here is another one of Renee sitting down as well. The lens really is beautiful. It's got a great look for portraits. It really has. This is 45 mil. And then I've got one here at 95 millimeter. So you can see it really does give some wonderful results for portraits. So let's now look at distortion. So I wanted to shoot these weatherboards just to see if there was, any sort of distortion going here, or if the boards weren't nice and straight, and they are fairly straight. I did notice on a couple of the beach ones, and I'll show you that a little bit later when we get to them, that there is a little bit of distortion on the horizon in the ocean. But I just wanted to test this out to see how this looked, and if I went fairly close here to the weatherboards, the distortion is pretty good. There's a little bit there, but this is at 76 mil, but it's fairly well controlled. So the distortion looks like it's fairly good. A longer distances though, you can definitely see it if you're looking at the ocean, and I'll show you that in some other images later on. So let's look now at chromatic aberration. If you look at these were shot. This was actually at 200 millimeter. And if we look up close to this, you can see that the chromatic aberration is very well controlled. I mean, it looks beautiful. In fact, I can't see any chromatic aberration at all. So it looks really good. If we look at another image here as well, this was shot at 28 mil. So, you can't see it up as close as the other one. But again, I can't see any chromatic aberration at all. So it looks like it's very well controlled in this lens at both, say, the 28 and the 200 millimeter. So let's look to it how this works with some landscape type shots. So these were just ones that I stopped out the car and just grabbed some shots around. This was one where the forest, it was beautiful. The light coming through the forest here was just stunning. So I grabbed a shot there, which I thought was just beautiful. And then just some waterfall shots with some filters on. I thought I'd try it. This was at 28 mil, and then I did another one at 52 mil, just to sort of give you, a different perspective. And again, there's a whole series of shots that I've taken through here. The rendering is really nice in the background. The colors are beautiful on this lens, nice and warm. The greens look really good. Again, there's some here just where we've stopped on the coastline just to grab some shots. You can see a whole series of shots here, nice and sharp, lovely images. This is getting fairly close to the yellow flowers that you can see, and it just shows it blows the background away. This was at 145 mil at 5.6. Again, this is looking down the coastline. Multiple. Now this one here is just showing how much you can zoom in. So this is 28 mil, and if you look at this building over here, you can see how that's brought that in, and that's at 200 millimeter. So the ranges are fantastic. Now, these haven't been cropped. It's great. It really does give a wonderful look. This one here, these were all with the a7 III, by the way. This is another one showing some of the ranges that you can get here. You know, if you look at the guy over here, you can see the results are really lovely and sharp. If I zoom this up, you can see the guy fishing down through the end down here. But it looks lovely. I mean, I think beautiful rendering, really nice lens. Again, this one here was shot at 28mm, and when I went to the 200mm, you can see the guy over here fishing. So, you know, you've got that great range all in one lens, which I think really is superb. This was another one where I wanted to grab a shot of the kangaroos. This here was at 200mm. They're the same shot, actually. I've just done two shots with different exposures. And this was 28mm. So this again is showing you the difference between, say, shooting at 28mm, where you can just see the kangaroos off in the distance through here, as against the kangaroos there where it's blown up. Actually, there's kangaroos all over the place. I didn't even notice those until I looked. They're all over there and even up the hill up here as well. So it's a really nice lens. This one was just showing a bit of the scenery that was around. I love the rendering here as well. And again, this is just something that was stopped at lawn, a beach location that I grabbed just a bit of a scene, and I wanted to grab this building as well. This also shows that it's fairly well controlled, this lens, in distortion as well, which was really nice. So now let's look at sharpness. Now, what I wanted to do here was I pulled up just on the side of the road, and I saw a kangaroo off in the distance. So what I did here was I just grabbed the camera out and it was in aperture priority at that time, just grabbed a shot, took it at 800, it's almost 190 millimeter at f5.6, and it's handheld and 1/200th of a second. And you can see that that's lovely. I mean, the sharpness on that is terrific for what I did in that regard. So, you know, I think it's a great result. Now, these ones here, if you're looking at this, I wanted to do a whole range of sharpening tests here. So this is 28mm, and I've just varied the aperture as we go along. So this is 28mm, and I'm going to just click in the center here so we can check sharpness. It's really quite sharp. Now, like I said, this hasn't had any sharpening done at all. It does go a fraction softer at the edges that I can see through here, but the sharpness itself of the image in the middle at 28mm is nice and sharp. Now, if we move over and check another one, now this is at f4. So if we go between f2.8 to f4, you can see it's a fraction sharper at f4, and I think it's probably sharpest around f5.6. And again, it's a little bit sharper on the edges. But I think 5.6 is probably the sweet spot of this lens. F8 is not quite as sharp. If I go between the two of them at f5.6, if you look down here, and then I go to f8, it's lost a little bit of its sharpness. F10, again, it's lost a little bit of sharpness, and F16, again, it's lost a little bit of sharpness. I think there's a little bit of diffraction at F16 as you go up, so that doesn't surprise me at all, though, when you're dealing with a lens sort of at this price range. But sharpness overall is really good, and I will show you between the 70-200 Sony lens and the Tamron lens, so we'll look at that now. If we're comparing the lens here, let me just zoom this down. The one on the left-hand side here is the 70-200 f4. Now, I've shot both of these at 70 at 200mm. They're both at 5.6 with the same settings. So it'll give you an idea about how the lens looks. The Tamron definitely has a bit of a more yellowy, sort of warmer look about it than the Sony does. This was all controlled in white balance, so I did set the white balance manually. This was a close-up image of those, so you can sort of check the difference in the sharpness at 200mm. The 70-200 f4 is on the left-hand side, and the Tamron is on the right-hand side. In fact, I think the Tamron in this case looks a little bit sharper, but we'll look at that a little bit later, because when we look at some of the sharpness tests in the next one, the Sony tends to be a little bit sharper. So we'll check that now. Now, this was one I wanted to do of a building, and I wanted to see how they both went. So this is the 70-200 Sony lens here, and this is the Tamron. Now, they are both, it's moved a fraction due to the different weight. The tripod that I had was only a light tripod, so it's bent down a little bit. It's moved a little bit, but they're both almost exactly the same size, I think. So they both are around about 200 millimeter. So if you're worried that it's not a true 200, I think the Tamron is about 200 millimeter. So that's pretty good. But if we look at the sharpness of this, if I zoom in the center here, you can see that here, if you look at the branches of this tree here through there, if I look at the Tamron is not quite as sharp in this instance. So I think the Sony in this instance beats the Tamron a little bit in sharpness here. Whereas it was interesting because I thought when we looked at the eyes before that the Tamron looked a fraction sharper. They were very close. I mean, there's not much in it, but I would think that the Tamron is just a little bit, the Sony 70-200 f4 is a little bit sharper in this regard. If I move it over to here to have a look, now this was put on a tripod, so they're both exactly the same, so nothing has changed. If we look at the trees, for instance, over here, and then I switch to this one, let me just move over. And then I'll switch back and forth. I'm going to try and get them similar area. I think again that the Sony is a fraction sharper. You can sort of see it there. It's just a little bit sharper than what the Tamron is. But if we look at the colors themselves, let me just open this up. If we look at the color between the two of them, you can sort of see here how much warmer the Sony. Now remember, this has had no correction done, so these are straight out of camera. This one here is the Sony 70-200 f4, and this one is the Tamron. So the Tamron's warmer. In fact, I like the color of the Tamron. Now remember, this is subjective, so it's up to you which you'd like. They were both control, where I said I had the white balance set on sunny actually. And, you can sort of see the difference between the two colors here. The Sony looks quite cold, whereas the Tamron looks nice and warm. And I think, like memory from looking at this, the Tamron, in fact, was a little bit closer to what the color was at that time. So I hope you found that interesting. Vignetting. I did the whole range of tests here for vignetting. You can see if this is at f2.8. And you can see there's a little bit of a netting in the corner up the top up here. And again over here. Now, if I move through, you'll see it disappears. So this is f2.8. The next one is on 3.2. You can see it's a little bit less on 3.2. And if you go to the next one, which is 3.5, a little bit less. Now, by f4, it's completely gone. So f4, there's really no vignetting at all. And I think f4.5 is even a fraction better. And from that point on, there's no vignetting at all. I did notice this was one place where I noticed as I went up, this is F9, F10. There's definitely a little bit of diffraction in the lens. If you look down in areas, I can see that the quality does suffer a little bit as you go up to, say, F14 to F16, and this one here is F16. There's a little bit of a loss in quality through here, as say compared to when you were shooting down at the lower apertures. I've just got to wait for this to render. So there is a little bit of diffraction there. But overall, the vignetting is very, very well controlled. I didn't go through the whole range of focal lengths because I would have been there all day, but you could sort of see there, but by F4, it was basically gone. So that's that regard. Also, this gives you an idea too. If there is any distortion, you can sort of see here that the horizon is a little bit bent in the middle. So it's not bad though, but remember there's no profile for this lens yet. So this will be fully probably corrected once you get the lens profile as well. The zoom range is really good because just to show you the difference, this was shot at 28 mil. The next one was shot at 200. So it just shows you, if you look at this area of the tree here, when I zoom this in, it's giving you an idea about the zoom range that you can get from this lens. So it's just a fantastic fantastic travel lens. The a6400, I wanted to give that a test as well, just to see how it works, because I know people are interested in that. This is at 28mm, and again, I've shot this one up to 133mm. Renee's walking towards me, and I was just testing the autofocus. Again, just walking towards me. This is at 200mm, so it gives you an idea about the rendering, and it's terrific. I think this will work great on the a6400. I also did some shots with some surface, and I just wanted to show that this was 200mm. They were a long way out. If you look, that's how far they were actually out from me, and that's zooming in. Now, the issue too here for me is that I really should have upped the shutter speed a little bit, and that's one thing I learned when I went through this, that because this has no stabilization, I was using this on the a6400, I should have upped the shutter speed. But it shows you the sort of range that you can get if you're dealing with this, with something like the a6400, and the rendering's lovely. And again, this is just the surface there as well. So to sum up, what do I think about this lens? Well, really, I think it's probably the best travel lens that you can buy for these Sony Alpha series cameras. And, you know, if you're talking about the, say, the a7 III, the a9, etc., it's just unbelievable due to the fact that you have stabilization built into those cameras. If you're dealing with, say, an a6400, you do have to be careful, and you've got to make sure you up your shutter speed due to the fact that that camera doesn't have stabilization, remembering that the lens itself doesn't have stabilization. But if you had, say, an a6600 that does have IBIS built in, I don't think it's an issue at all. I didn't find not having stabilization a problem at all with the other cameras I was using, like the a7 III and the a9. That focal range is brilliant, and to have that 2.8 aperture at the the 28mm end is fantastic if you're dealing with, say, low light and things like that. So I think this is a real winner for Tamron, and I think it is going to sell like crazy. It's certainly a lens that I will look at when I do my next trip, whenever we're over all this virus situation, and it certainly would be one that I'd love to have in my camera bag. Apart from that, guys, if you have any questions, leave them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much, Tamron Australia, for sending me this lens, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye for now.